Noah Grayson pulled his truck to the shoulder when he saw the police cruiser with its hood up, smoke curling into the cold December air. He told Sophie to stay buckled and stepped out into the wind. The officer turned at the sound of his boots on gravel, and when she removed her sunglasses, the world stopped. Brooke Ellison, the woman who had walked out of his life 10 years ago without explanation, leaving wounds he thought he had buried. Now she stood in front of him, while his 7-year-old daughter sat in the truck behind him, oblivious to the storm that had just begun. The woman standing beside the disabled cruiser looked older than the girl he remembered, her face sharper, her posture rigid in the winter light. But the eyes were the same, dark brown, guarded, searching his face the way they used to when she was trying to decide whether to tell him the truth or a version of it. Brooke spoke first, her voice steady but low. She said his name like a question, like she wasn't sure he would answer. Noah nodded once, not trusting himself to say anything yet. Behind him, Sophie shifted in her booster seat, humming something off-key. The sound reminded him where he was, what he was doing, and how badly he wanted to get back in the truck and drive away. But he didn't. He walked toward the cruiser, his boots crunching on the gravel shoulder. Brooke stepped back, giving him space to look under the hood. Steam rose from the radiator, and he could see the split hose before she said anything. It was a simple fix, the kind of thing that shouldn't have stranded anyone. But out here on Route 12, help didn't come quickly. She must have known that when she pulled over. Noah asked if she had called for a tow. Brooke said she had, but it would be at least an hour. She didn't ask him to stay. She didn't ask him anything. She just stood there with her arms crossed, watching him the way someone watches a stranger they're trying to place. It made him angry in a way he hadn't expected. The idea that she could look at him like that after everything. He told her he had a spare hose in the truck. It wasn't true, but he said it anyway because standing there doing nothing felt worse than lying. Brooke thanked him, her voice flat, professional. She wasn't wearing a wedding ring. He noticed that before he could stop himself, and then hated that he had noticed at all. Sophie called out from the truck, asking if they could go home soon. Her voice carried across the cold air, bright and impatient. Brooke turned toward the sound, and something shifted in her expression. Not sadness, exactly. Something closer to recognition or loss. She asked Noah if that was his daughter. He said yes, and didn't offer anything else. Brooke nodded slowly, as if she had expected it, as if the last 10 years had already told her this story. Noah went back to the truck and lied to Sophie about the hose. He told her he needed to make a quick call, that they would be home soon. Sophie asked if the police officer was in trouble. Noah said no, just car trouble. Sophie said that was okay then, because police officers helped people, so it was good that they were helping her back. The logic was simple, the kind only a 7-year-old could manage without bitterness. He stood outside the truck longer than he needed to, pretending to look through the toolbox in the bed. The truth was, he didn't have a spare hose, and even if he did, he wasn't sure he could stand there long enough to install it. His hands were shaking, not from the cold, but from something older, something he thought he had buried under years of routine and discipline. Brooke appeared beside him without warning. She asked if he was all right. Noah told her he was fine, which was the easiest lie he had told all day. She didn't believe him. He could see it in the way she looked at him, the way her jaw tightened just slightly. She said she was sorry for the inconvenience, that she would wait for the tow truck, that he didn't need to stay. Noah told her he didn't have the hose. The words came out harder than he meant them to, almost like an accusation. Brooke's expression didn't change. She said that was fine, that she appreciated him stopping anyway. Then she asked if Sophie was his only child. The question felt like a test, or maybe a trap. Noah said yes, she was. Brooke nodded again, slower this time, and looked back toward the truck where Sophie's face was pressed against the window, watching them with open curiosity. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of manure and frozen earth from the fields beyond the road. Noah remembered that smell from every winter of his life, the way it clung to his clothes and his skin no matter how many times he washed. He had hated it once, back when he thought he might leave Oakage and follow Brooke to the city. But he had stayed, and the smell had become something else. A reminder that some things didn't change, even when everything else did. Brooke said she had moved back to Oakage 2 weeks ago. She said it casually, like it didn't matter, like it was just another fact. Noah felt the words land in his chest, heavy and cold. He asked why. Brooke said she had been reassigned, that the department needed someone with her experience. She didn't say how long she would be staying. Noah didn't ask. He told her the tow truck would come eventually, that she should stay in the cruiser to keep warm. Brooke thanked him again, and this time there was something else in her voice, something that sounded almost like regret. Noah didn't want to hear it. He turned back toward his truck, toward Sophie, toward the life he had built without Brooke Ellison in it. But before he reached the driver's door, the memory hit him. Sharp and unbidden. The kind that doesn't ask permission. 12 years ago, the night before Brooke left for college, they had driven out to the lake at the edge of town. It was late August, the air still warm but carrying the first hint of autumn. They sat on the hood of Noah's truck, their backs against the windshield, watching the stars come out one by one. Brooke had been quiet all evening, and Noah thought it was because she was nervous about leaving. He told her it would be fine, that they would make it work. The distance didn't mean anything when two people wanted the same things. Brooke had turned to look at him then, her face serious in the dim light. She said she believed him. She said she would come back every chance she got, that Oakage was still home, that he was still home. Noah had kissed her, tasting the cherry chapstick she always wore, feeling the softness of her hair against his hand. She had kissed him back, hard and desperate, like she was trying to memorize him. Before they left the lake, Noah told her he would wait. It didn't matter how long it took, he would be there when she came back. Brooke promised she would come back. She promised a lot of things that night, and Noah had believed every one of them because he didn't know any better. Noah blinked, and the memory dissolved. He was standing beside his truck again, his hand on the door handle, his daughter humming behind the glass. Brooke was still by the cruiser, her arms crossed against the cold, watching him with an expression he couldn't read. He climbed into the driver's seat and started the engine without looking back. Sophie asked if the police officer was going to be okay. Noah said yes. Someone was coming to help her. Sophie asked if they would see her again. Noah said he didn't know, which was another lie. Oakage was small, and Brooke was a cop. Of course they would see her again. The question wasn't if, but how many times, and how long he could keep pretending it didn't matter. He pulled back onto the road and drove toward the farm, the fields stretching out on either side, bare and brown under the gray sky. Sophie chattered about school, about her friend Emma's new puppy, about the art project she wanted to finish before dinner. Noah listened without hearing, his mind still caught on the image of Brooke standing beside her cruiser, looking at him like she had something to say, but didn't know how to start. By the time they reached the farm, the sun was low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the barn and the pasture where the cows stood in their slow, patient clusters. Noah parked near the house and helped Sophie out of the truck. She ran ahead, her backpack bouncing against her shoulders, calling for Margaret, who was probably in the kitchen starting dinner. Noah stood in the driveway for a moment, breathing in the cold air, trying to clear his head. The farm was the only thing that had ever made sense to him. The work was hard but predictable, the rhythms of it steady and unbreakable. He had built a life here, a good life, one that didn't require him to think too much about what he had lost, or why. But now Brooke was back, and the careful structure he had built felt suddenly fragile, like a house with a cracked foundation. He told himself it didn't matter, that she was just another person in town, that he could ignore her the way he ignored everyone else who tried to get too close. But even as he thought it, he knew it wasn't true. Brooke Ellison had never been just another person, and 10 years hadn't changed that. Inside the house, Sophie was already telling Margaret about the police officer with the broken car. Margaret listened patiently, nodding in all the right places, but her eyes found Noah's over Sophie's head. She didn't ask any questions, but he could see them there, waiting. Margaret had raised him after his parents died when he was 8, and she knew him better than anyone. She would know something was wrong before he said a word. Noah hung his coat by the door and went upstairs to change. His room was the same as it had always been, plain and functional, with a bed, a dresser, and a window that looked out over the south pasture. He sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the floor, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Brooke was back. That was the only fact that mattered, and it was the one fact he didn't know what to do with. Downstairs, he could hear Sophie laughing, the sound light and easy. She didn't know what Brooke meant, didn't know the history that stretched between them like a scar. To Sophie, Brooke was just a police officer who needed help, and maybe that was all she needed to be. Maybe Noah could keep it that way, keep the past where it belonged, buried under years of silence and distance. But as he stood and walked back downstairs, he couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted, that the careful balance he had maintained for so long was about to tip. Brooke wasn't just passing through, she was staying, and that changed everything. Noah saw Brooke again 3 days later at the farmer's market on Saturday morning. He had taken Sophie into town to pick up feed and let her choose something from the baked goods table, the way they did every weekend. It was routine, predictable, the kind of morning that required nothing from him except showing up. But when he turned the corner past the vegetable stands, Brooke was there, standing near the honey vendor, holding a small jar up to the light. She saw him at the same moment he saw her. For a second, neither of them moved. Then Sophie tugged on his hand, asking if they could get cinnamon rolls, and the moment broke. Brooke set the jar down and walked toward them, her stride steady and deliberate. The way cops walked when they were on duty, even if they weren't wearing the uniform. She was in jeans and a dark jacket, nothing official, but Noah could still see the badge clipped to her belt. Brooke said hello to Sophie first, crouching down to her level and asking her name. Sophie answered without hesitation, the way she did with everyone, open and trusting in a way that sometimes scared Noah. She told Brooke about the cinnamon rolls and how her dad always let her pick 2 if she promised to share one with Margaret. Brooke smiled, the kind of smile that looked almost real, and said that sounded like a good deal. Noah stayed quiet, watching the exchange with something tight in his chest. Brooke stood and looked at him, her expression careful, neutral. She said it was good to see him again. Noah said nothing. He told Sophie they needed to keep moving, that Margaret was waiting for them at home. Sophie waved goodbye to Brooke, who waved back, and then they were walking away, back toward the truck, back toward the safety of distance. But distance didn't last. The following Tuesday, Brooke showed up at the farm. She pulled into the driveway in her cruiser just after noon, when Noah was fixing a section of fence near the barn. He saw the car and felt his stomach drop, the same sinking feeling he had felt on the road 3 days before. He wiped his hands on his jeans and walked toward her, forcing his expression into something flat and unreadable. Brooke stepped out of the cruiser and explained before he could ask. There had been reports of livestock theft in the area, she said. 3 farms in the past 2 weeks, all within a 10-mile radius. The department was doing check-ins, making sure everyone knew to lock their barns and keep an eye out for anything unusual. She said it like it was routine, like she hadn't chosen to come here herself. Noah listened without interrupting. When she finished, he told her he would keep the barn locked. Brooke nodded and thanked him, but she didn't leave. She looked past him toward the pasture, where the cows were clustered near the water trough, and said the place looked good, that he had done well with it. Noah didn't know what to say to that, so he said nothing. Brooke turned back toward her cruiser, but before she opened the door, she asked if he ever thought about leaving. The question caught him off guard. He asked what she meant. Brooke said she meant the farm, Oakage, all of it, whether he had ever wanted to go somewhere else. Noah told her, no, he hadn't. This was where he belonged. Brooke looked at him for a long moment, and then she said she was glad one of them had figured that out. She got in the cruiser and drove away, leaving Noah standing in the driveway with a wrench in his hand, and no idea what she had really been asking. That night, after Sophie was asleep, Margaret asked him about the visit. She said she had seen the cruiser from the kitchen window and wanted to know if everything was all right. Noah told her it was just a routine check, nothing to worry about. Margaret didn't look convinced. She set a cup of tea in front of him and sat down across the table, her hands folded in front of her. Margaret said she knew who Brooke was. She had known the moment Sophie mentioned the police officer with the broken car. Noah didn't ask how she knew. Margaret had lived in Oakage her entire life, and she remembered everything, especially the things people tried to forget. She said Brooke's return must be hard for him. Noah said it wasn't, that it didn't matter, that it had been 10 years and people moved on. Margaret didn't argue. She just looked at him with the quiet patience she had always had, the kind that made lying impossible. She asked him if he was protecting Sophie or protecting himself. Noah didn't answer. He finished his tea and went upstairs, but the question followed him, settling into the silence of his room like something he couldn't shake. The next time he saw Brooke, Sophie was with him. They were at the hardware store, picking up supplies for the irrigation system Noah had been meaning to fix for weeks. Sophie was in the paint aisle, fascinated by the color samples, when Brooke walked in. She was in uniform this time, her radio clipped to her shoulder, her expression serious until she saw them. Brooke walked over and said hello to Sophie, who lit up immediately. She asked Brooke if she had fixed her car, and Brooke said yes, that it was working perfectly now. Sophie said that was good, because police officers needed cars that worked so they could help people. Brooke agreed, and then she did something Noah didn't expect. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small plastic badge, the kind they gave to kids at community events. She handed it to Sophie and told her it was an honorary deputy badge, just for her. Sophie's face went bright with excitement. She thanked Brooke 3 times in a row, holding the badge like it was made of gold. Noah watched the exchange and felt something crack open inside him, something he had been holding shut for a long time. Brooke glanced at him just for a second, and he saw the question there, the same one she had asked at the farm. But this time, he didn't look away. On the drive home, Sophie asked why Noah didn't like Officer Brooke. The question came out of nowhere, casual and direct, the way kids asked things they didn't know were dangerous. Noah asked what made her think that. Sophie said it was the way he looked at her, like he was angry, but trying not to be. Noah told her he wasn't angry, that he just didn't know Brooke very well. Sophie said that was okay, because Brooke seemed nice, and maybe they could get to know her better. Noah didn't answer. He kept his eyes on the road and tried to ignore the weight of the plastic badge sitting on the seat between them, a small thing that felt like a threat. 2 weeks passed, and Brooke became part of the landscape. She was at the diner when Noah stopped for coffee. She was driving past the farm when he was out in the fields. She was everywhere, and Noah couldn't tell if it was coincidence or something else. He started avoiding town when he could, taking the long way home, skipping the farmer's market. But it didn't matter. Oakage was too small, and Brooke was too present. Then one evening, just after dark, Noah was out behind the barn replacing a section of fence that had rotted through. The work was slow, frustrating, the kind of thing that required patience he didn't have. He was halfway through when he saw headlights sweep across the field, slow and deliberate. A cruiser pulled up near the barn, and Brooke stepped out, her flashlight in hand. She called out to him, asking if everything was all right. Noah told her it was, that he was just fixing the fence. Brooke walked closer, her boots crunching on the frozen ground. She said she had seen the light and wanted to make sure it wasn't anything suspicious, given the thefts. Noah said he appreciated the concern, but he was fine. Brooke nodded, but she didn't leave. She stood there, her flashlight aimed at the ground, and the silence stretched between them like a physical thing. Then Brooke spoke, her voice quieter than before. She said she owed him an explanation. Noah told her she didn't owe him anything. Brooke said that wasn't true, that she had left without saying why, and that had been wrong. Noah felt the anger rise in his chest, sharp and sudden. He told her it had been 10 years, that whatever she had to say didn't matter anymore. Brooke looked at him, her face pale in the dim light. She said it mattered to her. Then she said something that made Noah's hand stop moving. She said she had been pregnant when she left. The words hung in the air, cold and impossible. Noah stared at her, trying to make sense of what she had just said. Brooke kept talking, her voice steady but strained. She said she had found out a week after he proposed over the phone that she had been terrified, that she didn't know what to do. And then, before she could tell him, she had lost the baby. Noah felt the ground shift beneath him. He asked why she hadn't told him. Brooke said she didn't know how, that she had been 21 and scared and convinced she wasn't ready to be anyone's wife or mother. She said losing the baby had felt like proof that she wasn't meant for that life, that she would only fail him if she stayed. So she had left instead, and she had spent the last 10 years trying to forgive herself for it. Noah didn't know what to say. The anger was still there, but now it was mixed with something else, something that felt like grief. He told her she should have trusted him, that he would have been there, that she didn't have to carry it alone. Brooke said she knew that now, but back then, all she could see was how young and unprepared she was. She said leaving him was the worst thing she had ever done, and she wasn't asking for forgiveness. She just wanted him to know the truth. Noah turned away from her, his hands gripping the fence post so hard his knuckles went white. He didn't want to hear this, didn't want to feel the weight of it pressing down on him. He told her she should go. Brooke didn't argue. She said she was sorry, and then she walked back to the cruiser and drove away, leaving Noah alone in the dark with a truth he didn't know how to carry. 9.5 years ago, Noah had driven 3 hours to the city to meet Brooke at a coffee shop near her campus. He had called her the week before and asked her to marry him, the words clumsy and rushed because he didn't know how else to say them. Brooke had said yes, her voice breaking over the phone, and Noah had felt like the luckiest person alive. He had taken his grandmother's ring from the drawer where he kept it and driven to the city with it in his pocket, imagining the moment he would slide it onto her finger. But when he walked into the coffee shop, Brooke was already sitting at a table near the window, her face pale and distant. Noah sat down across from her and pulled out the ring. But before he could say anything, Brooke stopped him. She said she couldn't do it, that she had made a mistake, that she wasn't ready. Noah asked what had changed. Brooke didn't answer. She just shook her head, her eyes red but dry, and pushed the ring back across the table. Noah sat there for a long time after she left, staring at the ring, trying to understand what had just happened. The barista had to ask him to leave when they closed, and even then, he sat in his truck in the parking lot until midnight, hoping Brooke would come back and tell him it was a mistake. But she didn't. And Noah drove home alone, the ring still in his pocket, the weight of it heavier than it had ever been. The memory faded, and Noah was back behind the barn, the fence half repaired, the night colder than it had been before. He looked down at his hands and realized they were shaking. He tried to steady them, but the shaking wouldn't stop. He thought about the baby Brooke had lost, the one he had never known about, and felt something break inside him that he didn't know how to fix. 3 days later, Noah heard from someone at the feed store that Brooke had been offered a promotion. She would be moving to a lieutenant position in the city, they said, probably within the month. Noah felt the news like a punch to the chest. He didn't know why it surprised him. Of course she would leave again. That was what Brooke did. She built things, and then walked away from them, and Noah had been a fool to think this time would be any different. He went home and threw himself into the work, fixing things that didn't need fixing, staying out in the fields until it was too dark to see. Margaret watched him from the kitchen window but didn't say anything. Sophie asked if he was mad, and he told her no, he was just busy. But the truth was, he was preparing himself for the same loss all over again. And this time, he told himself, it wouldn't hurt as much because he already knew how it ended. Noah spent the next week avoiding anything that might bring him into contact with Brooke. He sent Margaret into town for groceries. He skipped the farmer's market. He stayed on the farm from sunrise to well past dark, working until his body ached and his mind went quiet. Sophie asked why they weren't going anywhere, and he told her it was a busy time, that the farm needed him. She accepted it without argument, the way she always did, but Margaret watched him with the same quiet concern she had shown for weeks. On Thursday evening, Noah was in the barn checking the feed inventory when he heard a car pull into the driveway. He looked through the open door and saw the cruiser, its engine idling, headlights cutting through the dusk. He stayed where he was, hoping Brooke would assume no one was home and leave. But the engine cut off, and a door opened and closed. Footsteps crossed the gravel, slow and deliberate. Brooke called his name from outside the barn. Noah didn't answer right away. He set down the clipboard he had been holding and walked to the doorway, keeping his expression blank. Brooke stood a few feet away, still in uniform, her hands at her sides. She looked tired, the kind of tired that came from more than just a long shift. She said she needed to talk to him. Noah told her there was nothing left to say. Brooke said that wasn't true, that there was something he needed to know before he heard it from someone else. Noah felt his chest tighten. He asked what she meant. Brooke said she had been offered the promotion, the one everyone in town was already talking about. She said it would mean moving back to the city, taking a position as lieutenant, the kind of opportunity most people spent years waiting for. Noah nodded slowly, his jaw tight. He told her congratulations, and meant it to sound final, dismissive. But Brooke didn't leave. She said she had turned it down. The words took a moment to register. Noah asked why. Brooke said because she wasn't running anymore, that she had spent 10 years trying to outrun the person she used to be, and it hadn't worked. She said Oakage was where she needed to be, not because of him, but because it was the only place she had ever felt like herself, even when she was too scared to admit it. Noah didn't know how to respond. He told her she was making a mistake, that she had worked too hard to throw it away for a town that had nothing to offer her. Brooke said that wasn't for him to decide. She said she wasn't asking for his permission or his approval. She was telling him because he deserved to know, and because she owed him honesty, even if it came too late. Noah looked at her, really looked at her, and saw something he hadn't expected. She wasn't the girl who had left him 10 years ago, terrified and uncertain. She was someone else now, someone who had made her choice and was willing to live with it. He wanted to be angry, wanted to tell her she was being reckless, but the anger wouldn't come. All he felt was exhaustion, the kind that came from holding on to something too long. Brooke said she would stay out of his way, that he didn't have to worry about running into her every time he went into town. She said she understood if he didn't want anything to do with her, that she wouldn't blame him. Then she turned and walked back toward the cruiser, her shoulders straight, her stride steady. Noah watched her go, and for the first time in weeks, he felt something shift inside him. Something that felt almost like relief. That night, Margaret asked him what Brooke had wanted. Noah told her the truth, that Brooke was staying in Oakage, that she had turned down the promotion. Margaret nodded, unsurprised, and asked what he was going to do about it. Noah said there was nothing to do, that Brooke's decision didn't change anything. Margaret looked at him with the same expression she had worn when he was 8 years old, and trying to convince her he didn't need help with his homework. She asked him if he was still protecting Sophie, or if he was just protecting himself. Noah didn't answer. Margaret set a hand on his shoulder and told him that fear was a poor reason to turn away from something real. She said he had been a good father, a good man, but that Sophie needed more than just safety. She needed to see him take a risk, to show her that love was worth the possibility of pain. Noah said he didn't know if he could do that. Margaret said she thought he could, but he had to decide for himself. Noah went upstairs and lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, Margaret's words circling in his mind. He thought about Sophie, about the way she looked at Brooke with open curiosity and trust. He thought about the plastic badge she still carried in her backpack, the one Brooke had given her at the hardware store. He thought about the life he had built, careful and controlled, and realized it had never been about protecting Sophie. It had always been about protecting himself from the one thing he couldn't control: loss. 2 days later, on Saturday morning, Noah was fixing the fence along the north pasture when he saw Brooke's cruiser coming up the long driveway. He straightened, wiping his hands on his jeans, and watched as she parked near the house. She got out and walked toward him, not in uniform this time, just jeans and a jacket, her hands in her pockets. She stopped a few feet away and said she was sorry for showing up unannounced. Noah told her it was fine. Brooke said she had been thinking about what she wanted to say, that she had practiced it a dozen times, but now that she was standing here, none of it felt right. Noah waited. Brooke took a breath and said she wasn't asking him to forgive her, that she didn't expect him to trust her, but she wanted him to know that she wasn't leaving. Not this time. Not for a promotion, not for anything. She said she had made a choice 10 years ago out of fear, and it had been the wrong choice. She said she couldn't undo it, couldn't go back and be the person he needed her to be. But she could be someone different now, someone who stayed, who showed up, who didn't run when things got hard. She said if he didn't want that, she would understand, but she wasn't going to disappear just because it was easier. Noah looked at her, and for the first time since she had come back, he let himself see the truth. She wasn't asking for a second chance. She was offering one, not to him, but to both of them, a chance to build something that didn't rely on the past, that didn't carry the weight of what had been lost. He thought about what Margaret had said, about taking a risk, about showing Sophie that love was worth it. Noah asked Brooke if she wanted coffee. The words came out simple, almost casual, but they felt heavier than anything he had said in years. Brooke looked at him, surprise flickering across her face, and then she nodded. She said yes, she would like that. Noah gestured toward the house, and they walked together across the yard, the silence between them no longer sharp, but something softer, something that felt like the beginning of understanding. Inside, Margaret was at the kitchen table with Sophie, helping her with a coloring book. Sophie looked up when they walked in and smiled at Brooke, holding up the picture she had been working on. Brooke crouched down to look at it, complimenting the color Sophie had chosen, and Sophie beamed. Margaret met Noah's eyes over their heads, her expression warm and knowing. And Noah felt something loosen in his chest. He made coffee, the simple act grounding him, giving him something to do with his hands. Brooke sat at the table with Sophie and Margaret, answering Sophie's questions about police work, about the cruiser, about whether she had ever arrested a bad guy. She answered patiently, kindly, and Noah realized this was what he had been afraid of. Not that Brooke would leave again, but that she would stay, and he would have to decide whether he was brave enough to let her. When the coffee was ready, Noah set a cup in front of Brooke and sat down across from her. Sophie asked if Brooke could come back and visit again, and Brooke said she would like that, if it was okay with Noah. Sophie looked at her father, her eyes wide and hopeful. Noah said it was okay. Sophie grinned and went back to her coloring. Satisfied. Margaret stood and said she needed to check on something in the barn, taking Sophie with her, despite Sophie's protests. The door closed behind them, and Noah and Brooke were alone. Brooke wrapped her hands around the coffee cup, her gaze steady. She said she didn't expect this to be easy, that she knew it would take time. Noah said he knew that too. Brooke asked if he thought it was worth trying. Noah didn't answer right away. He looked out the window at the fields, at the barn, at the life he had built from the ruins of what he thought he had lost. He said he didn't know, but he was willing to find out. Brooke nodded, and something in her expression softened, something that looked almost like hope. They sat there in the quiet kitchen, drinking coffee, not saying much, but it was enough. It was a start. 3 months later, the farm looked the same as it always had, but the rhythm of it had changed. Brooke came by on her days off, helping with small repairs, sitting with Sophie while Noah worked, becoming part of the landscape in a way that felt gradual and real. She didn't push, didn't ask for more than Noah was ready to give, and slowly, the walls he had built began to come down. Sophie adored her, and Margaret approved in her quiet, knowing way. Noah found himself looking forward to the sound of Brooke's car in the driveway, to the easy conversation over coffee, to the moments when their hands would brush and neither of them would pull away. It wasn't perfect. There were still days when the past felt too heavy, when Noah wondered if he was making a mistake. But there were more days when it felt right. When he looked at Brooke and saw not the girl who had left him, but the woman who had chosen to stay. One evening, after Sophie had gone to bed, Noah and Brooke sat on the porch, watching the sun set over the fields. Brooke said she was glad she had come back. Noah said he was too, and realized he meant it. She leaned her head against his shoulder, and he let her, the weight of it familiar and grounding. He thought about love, about the way it required risk, required trust, required the willingness to be hurt again. And he thought maybe that was the point. Not to avoid the pain, but to choose the possibility of something real, even knowing it might not last. Noah looked out at the fields, at the life he had built, and knew it was no longer just his. It was theirs, fragile and uncertain, but growing stronger every day. And that, he thought, was enough. Do you believe someone truly deserves a second chance?